The next command is super spray. Now super spray basically gives you a very controlled spray. It allows us to manipulate it in such a way that we can direct every particle to travel along the same path, or we can force the particles to spray out. So let's take a look at it. Again, we just drag out the emitter, and as we can see here, the emitter for this one is very different from the emitter for spray. I'll just go back so we can edit it. Here we can see we've got controls over the particle formulation, in other words, what it's going to do off the axis. So if we look at this, we can see at the moment the particles are travelling straight up the z-axis, like so. We can tell it to go off axis by so many degrees, say 1 or 2. So now if we do this, you can see that they're travelling slightly off the z-axis. Let's do that a bit more so you can see that. There you can see off 10 degrees it's quite a decent off-axis shot. The spread, say I set that to something like 30, you can see that they're just shooting off in almost any direction. It's just spreading that over so many degrees from the axis, that's all that's doing. And then we've got plane. If I look at this particle system almost head on, you can see that all the particles are travelling along the same plane, the z-plane. So if I tell them to be off plane by so many degrees, there you can see that it's been rotated around. And again, if I tell that to spread, you'll see that they're going in almost any plane they like. So it's fairly useful. Again, we can change the type of particles we see on screen. So here we see ticks, I can change it to dots, and there you can just see dots coming out. We can change it to mesh. We can change the percentage of particles that we're going to see. Then we get down to things like particle generation. Now, I said earlier that super spray is basically spray with all of the controller types. And what this means is we can now control the speed of these particles, variation of speeds, the particle timing. So like before, we can control when it starts emitting. In this particular case, we can control when it stops emitting. We can control how many particles are seen on screen. And we can control the lifespan of the particles and the variation of the lifespan. We'll leave these alone for now, the subframe samples, and we'll move on to particle size. It's basic what particle size means. If we just drag out that, this will be the rendered size of the particles. So I'll just set that to say 3. The variation on size, so I want like a 15% variation. Growth from, fade to, so I can have them grow from that and fade away to that. The seed is a unique number mathematically made so that no particle system will look the same, and I can just tell it to generate me a new seed. Alright, the particle type, standard particle, metal particle, instance geometry. We can tell it to be a triangle, a special, a constant, and so on. If we were to take metaparticle, here we can see the tension, variation on the particle, and so on. So there's quite a bit we can do with the particles. If we were to take an instance, we could pick something on screen that we've pre-modeled. So you might want this to represent bullets coming out of a gun way off in the distance, and we could model up in one individual bullet, and the spray would simulate bullets flying out of the barrel of that gun. Rotation, we can control the spin, the tumble, and things like that. The blur, drag up some variation on that. bubble motion, the aperture, variation, and so on. So if I attach again my little red glowing material to this object and zoom away a bit and render this, you'll see how the particle system, or what the particle system is doing. So here we can see little red dots flying towards us and then disappearing.